Good idea. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Don Rutherford, Chair of the Philosophy Department at UCSD, and I want to welcome everyone on a sunny Saturday afternoon. There's any number of things you could be doing in San Diego other than talking about education, but I'm happy that everyone is here because it is a very important topic. This is the third and final event of the academic year in a new symposium series that our department began this year, Ethics in the Public Sphere. And as the title suggests, the point of this is to bring philosophers out of the humanities and social sciences buildings, where we do in fact occupy almost an ivy tower at the 7th and 8th floor up there, and to have us more closely engaged with issues in social political thought that are of concern, I think, to everyone, issues that engage our society. And the first two events during the year, we've had a symposium on our duties to distant needy people and issues of global justice. And then the second symposium was on the ethics of war. Today's symposium on the aims of education is one that, strikes all of our lives, I think, whether you're students or parents or grandparents. We all have an investment in the education of children in our society. And it's a topic that I think philosophers haven't dealt enough with, and it's a topic which is not dealt in a sufficiently philosophical way within the education system. So I'm hoping that today those two ends of the spectrum, sort of high-level theorizing, will come together with actual practice in the schools. In my sense, just given the titles of the talks and sort of brief conversations I've had with people already, is that we can hope to see that happen this afternoon in a really productive way. So I'm really looking forward to this session. My colleague Michael Tiboris is responsible for organizing this event, and he's just done a great job of getting the speakers to come and setting up a really great program, and he'll also be talking today, and he will be introducing the event in just a minute. Just a couple of things about the program and the proceedings this afternoon. First important thing to say is if you don't know where the restrooms are, they're just out the door and to the right. Okay, so they're there for you. The program will be almost the way it is on the handout. There will be 1, 2, 3, 4 talks after Michael's. After each talk, there'll be a question and answer period where everyone is invited to participate. At 3 o'clock, we'll break for refreshments, which will be set up outside, so there'll be lots of time to talk with each other. One small change in the program, one of our speakers, Gina Schouten, had been coming from Madison, Wisconsin, and unfortunately her flight was canceled. She wasn't able to get here. Fortunately, at the last minute, Michael Tiboris was able to pull another talk out of his bag, and this will now be his real talk, and that's going to be called College Undermatch and Personal Autonomy. So in place of Gina Schouten at 4:15, we'll have Michael Tiboris giving that talk. And I think that is just about everything I want to say, but to thank you all for coming again and to introduce Michael Tiboris from the University of California, San Diego.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Don, who has been super supportive and first of all, just sort of getting the idea of doing these sorts of talks together. This is the first year we've done it, and I think they've been really great so far. And then Suzanne Dager, who I don't know if she is. She's outside. Oh, there she is. I don't know. Where's she? Where'd she go? Anyway, she's totally. I could not have done this without her help. She's done a huge amount of legwork for me, and she's done that for all of the events. I think they have gone well, but they would have, they wouldn't have gone quite as well without her. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction to the topic, and it's mildly substantive. It's odd because I'm speaking both at the beginning and the end of this conference, so hopefully you'll be forgiving about that. So one of the things I've learned about difficult questions like this is that you're onto something important when about half the people you talk to say this question is just so controversial as to be a complete muddle, and the other half of the people say this is just so not controversial that the answers are obvious. This happens a lot in education. People either think that there's an obvious answer to what its aims are, or they think it's just the question is ill-formed. But there's no paucity of examples of views of what education is for in the history of philosophy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau famously thinks that Education is for bringing people closer to their nature as human beings. And John Locke thought that education was to teach virtue and the tight control of desire that we associate with adult humans. And John Dewey emphasized the way in which the school supports a democratic society. By the 1970s, the focus was on child-centered education, and I would say today that there's a significant strand in the way that we educate students that is focused on their entrance into the labor market and their ability to compete economically. Asking which of these goals is the right goal is, on the one hand, largely regarded as the province of philosophers and dusty armchairs. Right? It's not a place where the educational rubber hits the road. Doesn't deal with the business of educating. Now, this attitude, I think, is a little naive and actually maybe a bit dangerous because it drastically narrows the scope of the discussion about education to a kind of instrumentalism. It encourages us to approach the question of educational aims by thinking that education has some correct end or goal. It has a telos. And then the only real question, if that's true, is how to build the institutional mechanics to reach that goal. This means-end kind of instrumentalism about the aims of education assumes that education produces something else besides itself, a valuable and separate end, for which education can only be a means. The real object of value, in other words, is the thing that education is for. Perhaps we should look at it, for ways to secure that thing, that valuable thing, without the difficult, long, and expensive process of education that we now seem to have. The most practical end here seems to be, to many, the economic participation in the labor market. So the aim of education, many believe, is to mostly prepare young people for their jobs by providing them with the technical skills and qualifications that they need. So this is obviously true in one sense. We need a healthy economy, and if students are to be able to participate in meaningful work after college, and if we as a country are to be able to support the huge investments in education that this requires. And work is very important to people. Educational institutions would be a total failure if they couldn't provide people with the skills that they need to join the workforce. But this truism has the potential to make something about, make thinking about alternative aims of education look Pollyannish and almost silly. Sure, we can talk about it in philosophy classes, but where the educational meat is, the discussion must be limited to technical skill alone. Instrumentalism of this kind encourages a particular approach to pedagogy and institutional design that I think is potentially harmful. Not only harmful, but self-reinforcing in ways that make it seem like there really isn't any alternative. So it's no secret that colleges have become businesses to much greater extent than they used to be. And the pressures of the bad economy have exacerbated this. Struggling schools have forced many colleges to strip down to the bare educational essentials. And this has most often meant down to simply preparation for work. But I think the economic crisis has done us one service. It's sort of exposed this commitment to instrumentalism that we have, so we can bring it up for critique. And we can bemoan these changes at the university as a corruption of traditional university education, but it's all really perfectly consistent with, and in fact desirable from the perspective of the market efficiency, or the view of education as just a means to employment. So these observations, I think, are to a certain extent commonplace. But what could we do about them if we find them disturbing? Philosophy, which has the potential to provide powerful critique here, has also largely adopted this instrumentalism. The courses that are likely to survive in the changing university are ethics courses, which exist to support other disciplines like business ethics and medical ethics. I mean, these are important issues, but they give the sense that there's a sort of real topic here. The real topic is business or medicine, and that evaluative thought can just be sort of tacked onto those. To the extent that the business of educating makes money for the liberal arts scarce, the skills that they teach have become elective, basically. And instrumentalism at the university level also affects the primary and secondary educational institutions as well. For example, the focus on summative assessment and test-based accountability for particular college-relevant skills shapes the kind of education that students get, and also their view of what education is really for. So there are two questions here, I think. Should we try to change this? Should we adjust or revise the aims of education? And supposing that we wanted to, how could we do it? Opposition to instrumentalism doesn't commit a person to the view that education is only valuable for its own sake, or that universities should teach nothing but the liberal arts. A more attractive alternative to instrumentalism lies in thinking about education as a collection of practices which define a way of living and looking at the world, with curiosity, creativity, a critical eye, and with a value for self-improvement. As the political philosopher Michael Oakeshott puts it, to talk of educational aims in this context is really just shorthand for mastery of these practices. This is a more perfectionist view of education, that the point of educating, if you want to put it that way, is attaining a life defined by reason, curiosity, and the care for a better life for people like us. This is perfectly compatible with teaching students technical proficiency. It's not an alternative to it, but it does require a shift in our thinking about what it means to successfully educate someone. Several of our speakers today, I think, have this sort of thing in mind as they focus on practice of students and teachers. The second question, supposing that we wanted to revise the aims of education, could we do it, might actually prove in some ways tougher to answer. If institutions must simply respond to the demands of the economy around them, then we might wonder whether they really have the power to do anything about it. If we think it's a bad trend, how could we revise the aims of education in light of the powerful institutional momentum against doing so? Well, listening to these speakers today, I hope you'll see that there's some reason to hope that we could do so. A common answer to how might we change these things seems to be that to focus on the ways in which technology can improve education. Massive online courses expand access, iPads in every classroom expand interaction. Educational technologies, though, are more than just tools. They too shape the practice of education and what counts as success. Summative assessments in reading and math are truly important, but they're also the topics that are most easily measured and digitally analyzed. Massive online courses increase access, but they're also likely to encourage the view that education is just a tool for employment, as well as contribute to the further contraction of the academic workforce. We don't have, I don't think, a lot of control over the ways that technology has or will alter our view about what education is about or what it's even capable of doing. But it does have the possibility of opening up new paths to old goals for us. Consider, for example, that the almost instant access to facts provided by the internet could serve as a basis for a shift from trying to learn these facts to learning about how to think about managing information, right? How to find out what you need, how to critique sources and expand them in profitable ways. So the aims of education will be revised, as they have been many times before, whether we have the power to do something about it or not. Some schools are certainly attempting new things, and I think the thing to do, as we'll see today, is to look at some of the things that are working in those schools and focus on how they're doing that. So today, the first speaker will be Jennifer Morton from City College of New York, and we're going to, between each speaker, we'll take just like a 1 or 2 minute break so that I can switch the slides, but other than that, we'll stop for a longer break after Dan's.